It began on a warm Thursday evening, the kind of ordinary night where most people drove home thinking about dinner or work or the weekend ahead. Streetlights flickered on one by one across Maple Ridge, stretching long shadows over quiet sidewalks. Stores were closing, parents were hurrying kids into cars, and the city was settling into its predictable rhythm. But for Jordan Hale, 38, father of two, and a steady, soft-spoken man who rarely raised his voice, tonight would not be ordinary. Tonight would unravel everything he believed about safety, fairness, and the people meant to protect him. He didn't know that yet. What he felt, as he drove home from the late shift at the printing warehouse, was the growing heaviness behind his eyes. He blinked hard, rubbed his forehead, tried to shake off the fog building in his head. His fingers trembled faintly on the steering wheel. His heart thumped off rhythm, a dull, uneven beat he knew too well. He needed sugar. Glucose monitor had beeped earlier, but he'd been rushing through closing tasks at work, promising himself he'd eat the snack in his lunchbox once he got in the car. But then he got a call from his sister about the kids' school forms, and then a message from his neighbor asking if he'd gotten home safe after last week's long shift. And somehow the warning beep faded under everything else. Now he felt the consequences. The world around him started to blur at the edges, colors blending like wet paint. His breathing hitched. His grip on the wheel loosened without him meaning to. Come on, he whispered to himself, sucking in shallow breaths. He was only 7 minutes from home. 7 minutes. He could make it. His glove compartment held emergency glucose tablets, but his fingers were already too stiff to open it safely while driving. He needed to pull over. He knew that. But his mind was slipping, the way it always did when his blood sugar dropped hard and fast. He blinked again. The car drifted slightly toward the center line. Behind him, a patrol cruiser turned the corner, headlights washing over the pavement like a tide. The officer inside, Deputy Chad Wirk, 26, just 1 year into the job, noticed the subtle swerve immediately. His training was fresh, and he was eager to be the kind of cop who caught problems before they became tragedies. But tonight, he would become the tragedy. Rourke narrowed his eyes, straightened in his seat, and tapped the wheel. Probable impairment, he thought. Easy call. He hit his lights. Blue flashed across the quiet street like sudden lightning. Jordan flinched at the brightness exploding behind him. His heart jumped. His fingers tensed. His brain, foggy and struggling, misinterpreted everything. Not danger, he told himself. Just pull over. Just stop the car. He eased the vehicle toward the curb, but his movements were slow, uncoordinated. The car jerked slightly before stopping. Rourke lifted his radio. Dispatch. This is Unit 12, initiating a traffic stop. Possible DUI. Plate ending in 351. His voice held the tight confidence of someone who believed he understood the situation perfectly. He didn't. He stepped out of his cruiser, boots crunching over the gravel. Cars passed in the distance, oblivious. Porch lights glowed on nearby houses, families safe behind closed doors. Jordan leaned his head against the headrest, breath quivering. His vision tunneled, his skin damp with cold sweat. His chest tightened. He whispered the same word twice, voice breaking. Sugar, sugar. But it came out slurred, barely formed. Rourke approached the driver's side window. Evening, sir. License and registration. Jordan turned slowly, eyes glassy, unfocused, pupils struggling to react to the glare of the flashlight. His lips parted, but only a strained breath escaped. Sir, have you been drinking tonight? Jordan shook his head weakly. His hand twitched toward his wrist on instinct. His medical alert bracelet glinted faintly under the flashlight's beam. Rourke leaned closer. "What's that smell? You've been using something?" "Step out of the vehicle." Jordan tried again, tried to shape the word his body needed him to say. "Low, low." His voice wavered, breaking. "Sug, gar." To Rourke, it sounded like the muddled mumbling of someone deeply intoxicated. He exhaled sharply, jaw tightening. He had seen drunks before. He had seen the glazed eyes, the slurred responses, the unstable hands. This fit the pattern perfectly. Or so he thought. "Sir, I'm not asking again. Step out of the car." Jordan blinked, confusion clouding his face. His body moved sluggishly, as if underwater. He fumbled for the door handle, missing it twice before finally pulling it open. The moment he stood, his legs buckled. He caught himself on the frame, breath hitching. Rourke grabbed his arm. Hey, don't fall over on me. Come on, you can walk. Let's go." Jordan couldn't. His knees gave a second time, and he nearly collapsed. His bracelet slid into full view again, the red medical symbol clear as day. But Rourke didn't look at it. He was too busy trying to hold him upright. "Sir, you're under arrest for suspicion of driving under the influence." Jordan's head drooped. His lips parted in a fragile whisper, voice barely human now. "No. Low. Sugar. Please." Rourke tightened his grip. "Save it. You can explain at the station." He pulled Jordan's hands behind his back. The metal cuffs snapped shut over the medical bracelet. The one thing that could have saved him. Jordan slumped, breathing shallow, body weakening fast. His skin grew paler, colder. His legs buckled again, but the officer, misreading every sign, held him up only enough to finish the arrest. Neighbors across the street peeked out their windows, seeing only blue lights and a man too weak to stand. They didn't know they were watching a medical emergency. They didn't know they were watching someone dying slowly, handcuffed. And the night didn't know yet what it was about to take from him. Or what it was about to change. Forever. Jaden didn't remember leaving the classroom, didn't remember pushing through the doors into the hallway. He only became aware of himself again when he found his feet carrying him across the school courtyard, his breath sharp with leftover adrenaline from the confrontation with Mr. Dalton. A part of him still heard the echoes of Dalton's words. "You didn't build this. You don't belong in this program. You cheated." They replayed like a broken stereo loop, rattling in the back of his skull, not because he believed them, but because they came from someone who is supposed to lift students up, not crush them. Jaden swallowed hard, pacing across the concrete, palms pressed to his temples. He wasn't angry, not yet. Right now, he just felt tired. So tired his bones felt heavy. But tiredness didn't stop the world from moving. A shadow fell across the courtyard. A moment later, Mia stepped into view. "Hey." Her voice was soft, but steady. "You walked out fast." Jaden didn't turn around. "Yeah," he said, "I know." She stopped a few feet from him, hesitant, as if getting too close might break whatever fragile balance he was holding on to. "You okay?" He breathed out slowly. "No, and yes. I don't know." Mia crossed her arms. "You want to talk about it?" He shook his head. "What's there to talk about?" Dalton made up his mind the second he saw me. The silence stretched. Then Mia said quietly, "No, he made up his mind long before that." Jaden's eyes lifted. Mia took a step closer. "Look," she said, "you and I both know Dalton has this habit of deciding who he thinks is gifted and who isn't. And once he decides, that's it. You could build a rocket to Mars, and he'd still look for the tag that says made by someone else." Jaden let out a breath that was half laugh, half frustration. "Doesn't make it better." "No," Mia said. but we're going to make it irrelevant. He frowned, turning to face her. We? Yeah, she said simply, as if the answer had always existed. We. She reached out and tapped the folder under his arm, the blueprint packet they'd spent 4 months perfecting. You built an original design nobody else in this school could even dream of, she said. You think Dalton gets to decide whether you're capable? Jaden didn't reply. He didn't have to. Because suddenly, from across the courtyard, he heard a familiar voice. Jaden, Mia. Over here! They both turned. It was Evan, shirt untucked, backpack swinging from one strap, arm waving like a man trying to flag down a helicopter. Behind him were Jasmine, Noah, Farah, and 2 more robotics team members. The whole squad was there, which meant they heard, and they had questions. Evan jogged to them, out of breath. What, he panted, happened in there? Noah heard shouting, and immediately assumed it was you. I know, unfair, but statistically. Jaden held up a hand. Right, sorry, what happened? Mia looked at Jaden. He didn't sugarcoat it. Dalton said our design looked too advanced, Jaden said. Accused me of copying. Then he said he's pulling the interior build from the competition lineup until he verifies everything. Noah blinked. Twice. So, he thinks you stole it? Jaden nodded once. The group fell into a stunned silence. Farah was the first to speak. That's insane. We all watched you build that thing. Jasmine stepped forward, her voice sharper than usual. He can't just do that. At least, he shouldn't be able to. Yeah, Noah muttered, pushing his hair back. But he can. Dalton has the final approval for our entries. The air thickened. Jaden looked away, jaw clenching. Evan's expression started twitching. This was the I'm about to say something unwise face. So what? He said. We're just supposed to let him sabotage everything because he's jealous, or insecure, or whatever his problem is? Mia shook her head quickly and stepped between them before anyone said something that would get them suspended. Okay, everybody calm down. We aren't going nuclear, yet. Jaden didn't talk. He just stared at the pavement beneath his feet, the frustration inside him swirling like a storm he couldn't stop. It wasn't just the accusation. It was the timing. The interior concept prototype was due in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. They weren't just good. They had a real chance of winning regionals this year. A chance to show they weren't just the underfunded school with outdated equipment and a teacher who gave up on them. A chance to prove they deserved to be in the room with the elite schools that had sponsorships, special labs, and industry mentors. A chance Jaden had been working for since his freshman year. That chance was slipping away. Jasmine broke the silence. So what now? Mia answered before Jaden could. We keep building. Noah blinked. Even if Dalton bans the design? Yes, Mia said. Because if we finish it, if it's good enough, if it's undeniable, he won't be able to bury it. Farah nodded. We can finish the prototype without his approval. He only controls the submission forms. He doesn't control the work. Evan snapped his fingers. Exactly. We show up with something so good, he looks stupid for doubting us. Jasmine smirked. So, like usual. Jaden looked up slowly, the storm inside him settling into something sharper, something stronger. Determination, the one nobody touches because it smells like burnt metal and motor oil. Just us. Jaden's shoulders lowered slightly. For the first time since Dalton's accusation, hope sparked. Small, but real. Okay, Jaden said again, this time with resolve. We're doing this. We finish the interior design on our own terms. We finish it strong. Strong enough that nobody can deny it's ours. Mia smiled, soft but proud. There he is, but then Evan froze. Guys? We have a problem. Everyone turned. And there, walking across the courtyard, carrying a clipboard, and wearing a suspiciously smug expression, was Mr. Dalton, heading straight toward them. "Oh, perfect," Noah muttered. "The villain monologue is coming." Dalton reached them, posture stiff, eyes cold. "Jaden," he said, "a word." Jaden stepped forward slowly, the team behind him like a wall he didn't need to ask for. Dalton looked at the group with irritation. "This isn't a group discussion." Jaden's voice was calm. "It is if you're talking about our project." Dalton's jaw flexed. "You're suspended from interior design submission until further notice. The competition committee will review your work today, and if they determine the design is not original, your team will be disqualified from the regionals entirely." Everyone froze. Dalton wasn't just trying to punish Jaden. He was threatening the entire team. Mia stepped forward immediately. "You can't—" "Yes," Dalton said sharply. "I can." Jaden forced himself to breathe evenly. He didn't respond with anger. He responded with something worse. A calm, steady voice that said he wasn't backing down. "Then we'll make something you can't argue with." Dalton blinked. "What?" Jaden took one step closer, meeting his eyes. "We'll build something so original, so undeniably ours, so impossible to replicate, that when you see it, you'll know exactly who made it." For the first time, Dalton's confidence cracked. Just a hairline fracture. "Be careful, Jaden," he said quietly. "Ambition without guidance is dangerous." Jaden didn't flinch. "So is underestimating the wrong team." Dalton exhaled, turned sharply, and walked away. The courtyard remained silent for several long seconds. Then Evan whispered, "Okay, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen you say." Jaden finally breathed out, tension breaking. "Come on," he said. "We've got work to do." And as the team followed him toward the back building, toward the rusted workshop where they would rebuild their dreams from scratch, Jaden felt something steady settle inside him. He wasn't scared anymore. He was ready. The hospital room felt like a dim pocket of silence compared to the chaos that had swallowed the last few hours of Angela's life. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was the quiet after a storm, thick, heavy, trembling at the edges. Angela lay propped on the hospital bed, still pale, still shaky, but alive. Alive because of sugar. Alive because one medic had chosen to look closer when no one else did. Alive because fate had given her a second chance she hadn't even known she was losing. A nurse adjusted her IV drip, speaking in a low, kind voice. "You scared a lot of people today," she said gently. Angela tried to smile, but it came out more like a shiver. "I scared myself." She reached for the cup of water on her bedside table, hand trembling. Her muscles still felt detached from her body, as if she were wearing a suit several sizes too large. Her fingers brushed the plastic cup, but couldn't grip it. The nurse quickly stepped in and handed it to her. "You're going to feel weak for a bit," the nurse explained. "Your body used every drop of sugar it could to keep you conscious." Conscious. That word landed sharp, because she remembered the moment she lost it. One flash at a time. Her hands slipping from the steering wheel, the cold metal of the handcuffs. Her voice sinking like her throat had turned into wet sand. The officer's shadow leaning over her. And her bracelet, her lifeline, dangling helplessly under his grip. Her breath caught. She closed her eyes. The nurse paused. "Do you remember what happened?" Angela nodded slowly. All of it. Not the details, not the lines of dialogue, not the exact steps, but the fear. The helplessness. Her body stopped listening to her brain. The way she kept slipping away, begging someone, anyone, to see that she wasn't drunk, she wasn't reckless, she wasn't resisting, she was dying. The nurse touched her wrist, the one still faintly bruised from the handcuffs. Do you want to report what happened? We can call someone for you. Angela traced her thumb along the bracelet. The medical engraving glinted under fluorescent light, so small, so simple, yet ignored so carelessly. Part of her wanted to let the whole thing fade, to not revisit that fear. But another part, the larger part, couldn't let it go. Because she knew others like her, people who carried conditions that didn't scream for attention. People who relied on others to notice subtle signs. People with bracelets like hers, hoping strangers would understand. If I don't file a complaint, she whispered, someone else might not be so lucky next time. The nurse nodded with respect. I'll call someone from patient advocacy. As she stepped out, Angela let out a shaky breath and leaned back against the pillows. The IV beeped rhythmically, a soft, gentle reminder that she was still here. Not because of him, but despite him. At the police station across town, Officer Reeves sat in a small break room, shoulders hunched forward, eyes fixed on the floor tiles, as if they held answers he couldn't form himself. His uniform felt heavier tonight. His badge, which had always felt like a symbol of purpose, felt like a weight pressing into his chest. He hadn't gone home. Couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face slumping against the window of his patrol car. He replayed the moment her bracelet flashed under the sunlight, and the moment he dismissed it. His mistake wasn't inexperience. It wasn't nervousness. It was certainty. Dangerous certainty. The kind that makes a rookie believe he can assess a situation faster than reality itself. He rubbed both hands over his face, the tiredness behind his eyes mixing with guilt that felt too large to contain. Reeves, a voice called from the doorway. He looked up slowly as his shift commander stepped in, face unreadable, posture tight. Come to my office. Now. His stomach dropped. She led him into her office, a small, windowless room, saturated with paperwork, coffee cups, and the stale scent of long-held authority. Reeves sat down because she pointed to the chair, not because he wanted to. The commander placed a printed form in front of her, but didn't look at it. Instead, she looked directly at him. I reviewed the medic's statement, she said. Reeves felt his heart crawl up his throat, and the body camera footage. He swallowed hard. Do you understand the severity of what almost happened? He hesitated, but only for a second. Yes, ma'am. Then explain to me, she continued, voice sharper, why you ignored a medical alert bracelet visible on her wrist. He inhaled slowly. I thought she was intoxicated. And when she asked for sugar, he closed his eyes. I thought it was an excuse. And when her hands trembled, when she couldn't walk, when she slumped in the car, he didn't answer. He couldn't. The commander leaned forward. This wasn't a mistake about protocol. This was a mistake about humanity. The words sliced through him. You will be placed on administrative leave, she said. Internal Affairs will open a full investigation, depending on their findings. This could lead to suspension, termination, or criminal charges. He didn't argue. Didn't try to defend himself. Because somewhere deep inside, a truth had finally broken through. He had been so focused on proving himself that he stopped seeing the person right in front of him. The commander continued, If the medic hadn't intervened when he did, she would have died. That sentence carved him open more than any reprimand could. He blinked slowly, staring at his badge. The symbol that once meant pride now looked like something he wasn't sure he deserved to wear. "Go home," the commander ordered. "We'll discuss next steps tomorrow." Reeves stood. His legs felt weak. As he left, he passed the empty holding rooms and imagined her lying inside one, unconscious, dying, misunderstood. A tremor ran through him. He whispered into the quiet hallway, a confession meant for no one but himself. "I failed her." And for the first time since becoming an officer, he truly understood what that meant. At the hospital, Angela's phone buzzed from her bedside table. She reached for it with a trembling hand. A flood of notifications lit up the screen. Texts, missed calls, social media tags. Her video, because someone at the station had leaked the body cam, was already spreading. The moment she lifted her bracelet, the moment Reeves dismissed it, the moment her body went limp, people were talking. People were angry. People were rallying for her. She didn't know whether to cry or cover her face. But one thing was certain. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It was a warning. A lesson carved into a night she barely survived. And the next chapters were only beginning. The world outside burned with noise, sirens, distant horns, and the muffled roar of traffic. But inside the small administrative office, the air felt unnaturally still, as if silence itself had sat down, crossed its arms, and refused to move. Detective Marissa Clark stood behind her desk, arms folded, eyes fixed on the glowing monitor. The body cam footage played again in front of her, frames she had watched so many times her mind could recite them perfectly. Yet each time, she found herself leaning closer, jaw tightening, breath thinning. "Play it from the beginning," she said. The technician clicked. The footage reset. Blue lights flashed against the screen. Angela's car drifted across the lane. The officer stepped out of his cruiser. The same sharp tone. The same dismissive look toward the medical bracelet. The same collapse. Everything inside Clark hardened. She'd seen carelessness before. Cut corners, misread cues, poor judgment under stress. But this wasn't that. This was blindness wrapped in confidence. This was danger disguised as procedure. "Detective?" the technician asked, hesitant. "Do you want me to prepare a written summary for internal affairs?" No. Clark's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried weight, like steel beneath velvet. "I'll do it myself." She straightened, stretching her spine slowly, as if the video had added pounds across her shoulders. She closed the file, grabbed her notebook, and walked out of the office without looking back. She had work to do. Meanwhile, across the city, Angela lay in a dimly lit hospital room, monitors softly beeping in steady rhythm. The harsh fluorescent lights had been replaced with warm yellow bulbs that cast a gentler glow across her face. She blinked awake, groggy but conscious, with the fog of medical emergency slowly clearing from her mind. A nurse entered, gently checking the IV line. "You're stable," she said softly. "Rest is what you need." Angela opened her mouth, but her voice cracked like dry paper. "My car?" "It's been impounded temporarily," the nurse explained. "The precinct will release it once the investigation completes." Investigation. The word hit Angela like a cold rush of wind. Her pulse rose. What? Investigation. The nurse hesitated. There was a misunderstanding during the arrest. The footage went to the review board. A misunderstanding. Angela's fingers closed around the bedsheet. He didn't listen. The nurse put a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to explain right now. You're safe. And safe. The word felt fragile in her chest. Safety was supposed to be something she could trust. Something that didn't crumble the moment she stepped outside her home. But that night, safety had become a stranger. At the precinct, Officer Daniel Reeves sat alone in the interview room, elbows resting on the metal table, staring at nothing. A styrofoam cup of coffee sat untouched in front of him. His badge, placed hurriedly next to it, reflected the cold ceiling lights. He wasn't wearing his uniform anymore. Just a plain gray shirt. No belt. No authority stitched across his chest. He looked younger without it. Smaller. Almost lost. The door opened. Detective Clark entered, pushed a folder onto the table, and sat across from him. She didn't offer him a smile. Didn't offer comfort. She just studied him. Steady, silent, unblinking. "Officer Reeves," she began. He swallowed. "Detective." She clasped her hands. "I'm going to ask you questions. You're going to answer them honestly." A pause. "Do you understand?" He nodded. "Good." She opened the folder. "Start from the moment you saw her car drift. Tell me what you thought." Reeves cleared his throat, eyes fixed on the table. I believed she was intoxicated." "You believed," Clark echoed. "Based on." "Lane drift, slow reaction, slurred speech." She leaned forward. "Did you consider medical impairment?" He winced. "No." "Why not?" Reeves paused. "It looked like a DUI." "Looked," she repeated. "You didn't check her vitals. You didn't ask clarifying questions. You didn't inspect her vehicle for medical supplies. You didn't radio for medical assistance." Reeves's jaw clenched. "I was following protocol for impaired drivers." "No," Clark's voice sharpened, precise as a scalpel. "You were following a conclusion you reached too fast." He flinched. She picked up a still frame from the video. Angela, lifting her wrist, bracelet shining. She held it up to him. "This is a medical alert bracelet." He nodded weakly. "She tried to show it to you." I didn't see it clearly," he whispered. "You looked right at it." Silence. Reeves felt himself shrinking, folding inward, the way Angela had collapsed against the patrol car window. "I made a mistake." Clark leaned back. "A mistake," she said quietly, "is forgetting to sign a report. A mistake is misfiling paperwork. What you made," she tapped the photo with a single finger, "was a decision. And decisions have consequences." Reeves looked down at his hands. "Is she alive?" "She is." Clark stood, but she almost wasn't. Reeves exhaled shakily. "Internal Affairs will reach out within 48 hours, Clark said, gathering her papers. "You're on administrative leave until then." "What happens next?" His voice cracked against the weight of dread. "Next," she said, opening the door, "we determine if you're fit to carry a badge." She stepped out. The door closed behind her with a final click that echoed across the hollow room, sealing a truth Reeves could no longer run from. His career was hanging by a thread, and he had tied the knot himself. Back at the hospital, Angela sat upright, staring at the muted news broadcast. Her story was everywhere. Shared, debated, dissected. She saw her own limp body slumped in the patrol seat. She saw her bracelet glint under the lights. She saw him walking away. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, with anger, real anger, the kind born from survival. A nurse stepped in again. "You okay?" Angela wiped a tear that escaped without her permission. "I will be." She looked at her wrist, at the bracelet that had tried, desperately, to speak when she couldn't. She whispered to it, as if promising something to herself. "You're going to be heard." Because silence had almost killed her, and she wasn't letting it happen again. The hearing room felt colder than any holding cell Daniel Reeves had ever walked past. No bars, no echo of shouting, no metal doors slamming, just polished wood, a long table, and 3 people in suits who already knew more about his mistakes than he wanted to admit. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing everything in flat white. His name was printed on a folder in front of them. "Officer Reeves," the woman in the middle said, glasses low on her nose. "Have a seat." He sat. His uniform felt wrong on his shoulders, like it belonged to someone who hadn't seen what he'd seen, replayed on a screen 100 times. The body cam still frame lay printed between them. Angela at her car window, wrist lifted, the red medical bracelet bright against her skin. A single moment frozen in time. The moment everything should have changed and didn't. "Walk us through your decision-making that night," the woman said. He swallowed, throat dry. "I observed lane drift. She crossed the center line. When I approached, her speech was slurred, eyes unfocused. She didn't follow commands. All indicators suggested intoxication. And the bracelet," the man on the left interrupted. Reeves stared at the photograph. The bracelet glinted under a reflection of his own flashlight. He could see his hand in the corner of the frame, blurred mid-motion, moving away instead of closer. "I saw it," he said quietly. "And?" the man pressed. He felt the word before he said it. Heavy, shameful, final. "I dismissed it." The silence that followed was louder than any siren. The woman folded her hands. Why? There were a dozen excuses he could have tried. Training gaps, adrenaline, inexperience. But none of them could erase the footage of Angela lifting her wrist, while he chose the story in his head instead. He stared down at his hands. "I wanted to be right," he admitted. "I thought I had a drunk driver. I didn't stop to consider I might be wrong." The third board member, a graying man with tired eyes, leaned forward. "You had information that could have changed your interpretation. You chose not to use it. That is the problem." Reeves nodded once. It felt like his neck was made of stone. "I know that now." "Now," the woman repeated softly. "But that night, she nearly died in your custody." The word "died" hit him like a physical blow. He had replayed that sentence in his head, alone, in the dark, but hearing it here made it real in a way nothing else had. He could see her again, slumped in the back seat, head against glass, breathing shallow. He remembered thinking, she's finally calm. She hadn't been calm. She had been slipping away. "We've reviewed the body cam footage," the woman said. "We've heard from medical experts. We've heard from Miss Brooks. You understand this isn't just about a mistake. It's about negligence." He nodded again. There was nothing else to say. "Step outside while we deliberate," she said. He stood. His legs felt too stiff, like they didn't want to move him any closer to whatever came next. He left the room, the door clicking shut behind him. The hallway outside was empty, just a row of chairs and a vending machine humming in the corner. He sat down, staring at the floor. He had worn this uniform for less than a year. He had dreamed about it for half his life, and now he wasn't sure he deserved it at all. He thought of Angela in the hospital, waking up to monitors and IV lines instead of her own bed. Thought of her saying, "I told him I needed sugar," to a nurse who actually listened. Thought of her name in headlines he never wanted to see. He pressed his fingers against his eyes. If the medic had arrived 10 minutes later, if the IV had taken longer, if the glucose gel hadn't worked, He might have killed someone and never fired a shot. The door opened. "Officer Reeves," the woman called. "We're ready." He stood and walked back in. The hearing room felt even smaller now. They didn't drag it out. The man on the left cleared his throat, voice clipped and neutral, the tone of someone who had delivered bad news many times. "After review of the evidence, we find that your actions constituted a failure to recognize a medical emergency, negligence in duty of care, and improper handling of a detainee in crisis. Each charge landed like a hammer on glass. Effective immediately," the woman continued. "Your certification is revoked. You are relieved of duty and no longer authorized to serve as a sworn officer in this department." He didn't argue. There was no point arguing with a truth he had already seen frame by frame. "Do you have anything you want to say?" she asked. He thought of excuses, of explanations, of all the ways he could soften what he had done. What came out instead was simple. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I can't change what happened. But I know I was wrong. And I know I should have listened." They didn't respond. This wasn't the kind of room that offered absolution. He took off his badge and set it on the table. For the first time since he had been sworn in, his chest felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter without the medal, heavier with the knowledge of what he'd done wearing it. He walked out of the building without a uniform, without a rank, without a future he recognized. Out on the street, traffic moved like nothing had happened. People crossed sidewalks with coffee cups in hand. The world didn't pause for his downfall. He stood there for a moment, just another man in plain clothes, before finally walking away. Across the city in a quiet hospital office turned temporary conference room, Angela Brooks sat across from her attorney and a city representative. A glass of water sweated slowly on the table beside her. Her medical chart, photographs of her bracelet, stills of the body cam footage, everything was neatly arranged in a file between them. "We've finalized the settlement terms," her attorney said. "The city is agreeing to a financial compensation package, a formal public apology, and mandatory medical emergency recognition training for all officers over the next 12 months. Angela listened, fingers absently brushing the engraved letters on her bracelet. Type 1 diabetic. Insulin dependent. The same words that had been ignored when she needed them most. "This doesn't erase what happened," the attorney continued gently, "but it does put pressure on systemic change, and it acknowledges they failed you." Angela nodded slowly. "Will the training actually happen?" "Yes," the city representative said. "It's written into the agreement. If we don't follow through, we're in breach." She leaned back in her chair. She had never imagined her life would include legal language and press conferences, and strangers arguing about her survival on television. She had just wanted to get home from work, to take her medication, to sleep. "Do you want to speak at the announcement?" her attorney asked. "You're not required to. You can let us handle it." Angela thought of the footage again, herself slurring, hands shaking, voice falling apart while she tried to say one word. Sugar. The word that could have saved everyone so much pain if it had been understood. She looked up. "I'll speak," she said quietly. "If they're going to use my name, I want to use my voice." 2 weeks later, she stood behind a podium on the steps of the courthouse. Cameras clicked. Microphones leaned toward her like mechanical flowers. The city attorney spoke first, reading prepared statements about responsibility and reform. The police chief followed, announcing new training protocols, revised policies, mandatory medical alert recognition modules. Then it was her turn. She stepped up to the microphone, the crowd a blur of faces, some angry, some supportive, some just curious. Her heart thumped hard, but her voice, when she spoke, surprised even her. Calm, steady, clear. "I survived," she began, "because someone finally recognized what was happening. Not because I was believed at the beginning, but because I was treated in time at the end." Flashes popped. "This should never have gone that far," she continued. "I told him I needed sugar. I showed my bracelet. I did everything you're taught to do when you have a medical condition that can put you at risk." She lifted her wrist, letting the cameras see the red symbol. "This," she said, "is not decoration, it's communication. It's how people like me tell the world how to save our lives when we can't talk anymore." Reporters scribbled. Someone in the crowd nodded, tears glinting. "I don't hate every officer," Angela said. "I don't think every cop is out to hurt people. But I know this. Authority without awareness is dangerous. And listening is not optional. It's part of the job." She paused, letting the words settle. "I can't change what happened to me. But if this leads to better training, if one person gets help instead of handcuffs because someone remembered this story, then something good came out of a night that almost ended my life." She stepped back, heart pounding, but lighter somehow, not healed, not fixed, just heard. Later, at home, she sat at her kitchen table with a notebook open in front of her. The settlement check sat folded in an envelope nearby, untouched. She could have used it to move, to start over, somewhere no one recognized her face from the news. But starting over somewhere else didn't change what happened here. She wrote 3 words at the top of the page: Bracelet Awareness Initiative. An idea had been growing quietly in the back of her mind for weeks. Training focused not on weapons or tactics, but on the small, easy-to-miss signs that could mean the difference between life and death. Medical alerts, seizures, confusion, shock, things that whispered instead of screamed. She tapped the pen against the paper. Maybe she couldn't fix everything, but she could teach. She could tell her story in rooms where people wore badges and believed they understood danger, until someone showed them another kind of threat, quiet, invisible, internal. She began to outline the first session. Across town, in a small apartment that still smelled faintly of fresh paint and cardboard boxes, Daniel Reeves sat on a couch in plain clothes, watching the replay of her speech on a flickering television. He watched her lift her bracelet to the cameras, watched her say the word communication like a verdict. He muted the sound and sat there, staring at her wrist. He had seen that bracelet in person once. Up close, clear, obvious. He had turned away. The badge he'd taken off at the hearing was gone, locked in an evidence box of his own mistakes. But the weight of it hadn't left his chest. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and whispered to the empty room, "I'm glad you're still here." No one heard him. But he meant it, and for the first time, he let himself really feel what that meant. That her survival wasn't just a lucky outcome. It was a second chance. For her. For him. For everyone who might learn from what he failed to see. Outside, the city moved on. Inside 2 different homes, 2 people sat with the same memory, facing it from opposite sides. One is the survivor, one is the cause. They didn't know it yet, but their paths would cross one more time. And when they did, the story that began with flashing lights on a quiet Ohio street would finally find its last turning point. The hearing room felt colder than the rest of the courthouse, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the weight hanging in the space. The weight of truth finally landing. The weight of consequences chasing the man who tried so hard to outrun them. Officer Derek Hale tried to sit still, but everything inside him was moving, twisting, tightening, sinking. His palms were damp, his breathing shallow. The badge he once wore with pride now sat in a plastic evidence bag on the table beside him. It looked smaller that way, lighter, almost like a reminder of what he used to be, before one night carved a permanent scar across 2 lives. Across the room, the board members entered silently, files tucked under their arms, faces unreadable. These weren't judges. These were investigators, people trained to strip away emotion and look only at facts. And facts, for the first time, were not on Derek's side. The chairwoman adjusted her glasses and opened the folder in front of her. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. Officer Hale, let's revisit the events of your stop. His stomach tightened. Not this again. Not the footage he'd replayed thousands of times. Footage that lived in his nightmares. Footage that turned him from an officer trying to prove himself into a man trying to understand how he'd nearly killed someone without even realizing it. He nodded stiffly. Yes, ma'am. The projector flicked on. The screen behind him glowed. There he was, younger, confident, sharp posture, eyes scanning the road like he was hunting for problems to solve. There was the drifting car, the turn signal that flickered too late, the hesitation at the stop sign. He remembered how his adrenaline spiked that night, how he thought he'd found something big, something that would earn him respect, a clean DUI arrest, a good catch. Then the screen showed her, Grace Lawson. He watched her again, hands trembling on the steering wheel, voice weak, eyes fighting to stay open. He watched himself lean into the window, with an edge in his voice he could barely listen to now. He watched her lift her wrist. The bracelet. The medical alert bracelet. She'd lifted it with everything she had left, like someone lifting a flare in the dark. And he, the man now sitting in this freezing room, barely glanced at it before turning away. A knot pulled painfully in his chest. He closed his eyes for a second, but it didn't stop the memory. Nothing ever stopped the memory. The chairwoman paused the footage. Officer Hale, do you acknowledge that she showed you this bracelet? His voice cracked. Yes. And yet you proceeded as if she were intoxicated. He swallowed hard. I did. The second board member leaned forward. Why? Derek's jaw clenched. He didn't want to answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he did. Because the truth was ugly. And real. And his. I wanted to believe I was right, he said quietly. I didn't want to slow down. I thought confidence meant control. I didn't want to look uncertain in the middle of a stop. Silence thickened in the room. The third board member exhaled slowly. Your job is not to look confident, Officer Hale. Your job is to protect life. He dropped his head. I know that now. But knowing now didn't change the past. The board chair opened another file. Photos. The bracelet. The glucose tube paramedics had used. Hospital documents showing how dangerously low Grace's blood sugar had been. Had medical help been delayed another 10 minutes, she began. He finished the sentence in a whisper. She would have died. The words cut deeper than anything they could say to him. The footage resumed, showing him arresting her, her collapsing in the patrol car, her head falling against the window, her near comatose state in the booking room. He watched himself pat her shoulder roughly, frustration in his movements, completely unaware he was handling a dying woman. He couldn't look. He forced himself to anyway. You have to face this. He told himself. You caused this. You can't heal from what you keep hiding from. When the video finally ended, the room was silent for a long moment. Finally, the chairwoman spoke. This board finds the following. Derek's hands trembled on his lap. Severe misconduct. His throat tightened. Failure to identify a medical emergency. A dull ache spread through his chest. Reckless endangerment. He closed his eyes. And violation of duty of care protocols. He nodded, barely. Her tone softened only a fraction. Officer Hale, based on the evidence and testimony, your peace officer certification is hereby revoked. A single sentence. A career erased. A life redirected. He felt the world shift beneath him. Not a drop, but a slow, painful tilt. The kind that didn't make you fall instantly, but made you lose balance in a way you'd never regain. He didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't defend. He just whispered, I understand. Because he finally did. The board members stood. The chairwoman paused briefly as she gathered her files. Grace Lawson survived, she said softly. But this is a reminder. Someone under your authority may not get another chance if you don't slow down. He nodded again, jaw tight with emotion. I won't forget. Ever. She held his gaze. See that you don't. They left him alone in the room. For a long moment, Derek didn't move, couldn't move. His hands clenched the edge of the chair until his knuckles whitened. His breath shook on the way out. His badge, lying in the evidence bag, reflected the overhead light. A faint glint, like a ghost of who he used to be. He reached for it slowly, then stopped. He wasn't an officer anymore. But maybe, just maybe, he could become something better. He stood, straightened his shoulders, wiped the moisture from his eyes, and walked out of the room. Not as a man defined by failure, but as a man determined to learn from it. The day of Angela's community forum didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a turning point the whole city had been slowly walking toward without knowing it. The community center parking lot filled long before the event began. Cars lined the street, and people made their way to the entrance, carrying not signs or anger this time, but notebooks, medical alert pamphlets, and questions they never thought they'd need answers to. Officers arrived too, some in uniform, others dressed down to avoid intimidating the crowd. They weren't there for show. They were there to learn. Inside the hall, rows of chairs were arranged in a broad semicircle around a projector. At the center, a small podium waited, microphones still, screen dimmed. The room hummed with quiet conversation as more people filed in, until standing room was all that remained, unseen, watching the crowd. She still wasn't used to being the reason people gathered. When she was younger, she pictured herself as invisible, someone who could slip through a room unnoticed. But now, her presence drew attention not because she wanted it, but because her story forced the world to confront something uncomfortable and real. She took a breath, steadying herself. Her fingers brushed the medical alert bracelet on her wrist, still scratched from the night everything changed, but shining all the same. A volunteer tapped her shoulder. They're ready for you. Angela stepped onto the small platform. The murmurs quieted instantly. She didn't smile. She didn't posture. She simply lifted the microphone and spoke. Thank you for being here, she began, her voice soft but carrying through the room. 3 months ago, I didn't think I'd be standing anywhere, much less in front of a crowd, talking about survival. But I'm here. And that's something I won't take for granted. The room leaned in. My story isn't special because it's dramatic, she said. It's special because it's common. Too common. Hypoglycemia mimics intoxication. Seizures mimic resistance. Panic mimics aggression. A badge doesn't make someone perfect. and a medical emergency doesn't always look like what television taught us. Her hand lifted slightly, fingers touching her bracelet. "This little piece of metal saved me," she said, but only because someone eventually saw it. A few officers lowered their eyes, and that's why we're here tonight, to make sure eventually becomes immediately, to make sure assumptions don't cost someone their life. She clicked the remote. The projector brightened to show diagrams, symptoms, real case studies. She broke down hypoglycemia in plain English, described the signs most people overlook, explained the difference between impairment and crisis. She didn't shame, she didn't accuse, she taught. The audience absorbed every word. About halfway through, she noticed a man standing in the back, baseball cap, plain clothes, hands clasped in front of him. He didn't sit. He didn't shift. He just stood still, listening. Reeves. He hadn't announced he would come. He didn't walk in through the main doors. He didn't move closer during her talk. But he was there. She didn't call him out. She didn't point. She didn't even let her eyes rest on him more than a second. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about the people she could help. When the session ended, applause filled the room. Not wild, not explosive, but deep and steady, like gratitude made into sound. Angela stepped down as people approached with questions. It took half an hour before the crowd thinned. By the time she reached her bag, only a few volunteers remained. She turned and found Reeves standing a few feet away. He wasn't in uniform. He wasn't carrying authority. His posture was small, his shoulders lowered, as if he expected the floor to open under him at any moment. "I didn't want to interrupt," he said quietly. "I just wanted to hear it from you." Angela didn't move. "You already heard it the night you arrested me. You just didn't listen." The words weren't cruel. They were simply true. His jaw tightened. He nodded slowly, taking the hit without flinching. "I know. And I can't undo anything I did. But I'm trying to understand. Not because I think it fixes anything, but because I owe it to you." Angela studied him for a moment. She didn't see the officer who arrested her. She saw a man who had grown more in 3 months than he had in years wearing a badge. "Understanding won't erase what happened," she said. "I'm not asking it to," he replied. "I just don't want to be the reason someone else gets hurt the same way." Silence settled between them. Not heavy, not hostile, just honest. Finally, she nodded once. "Then keep learning, keep listening. And don't ever let your certainty be louder than someone else's pain." He swallowed hard. "I won't." She believed him, not fully, not blindly, but enough. They parted without a handshake, without forgiveness, without any dramatic final line. Because life rarely ends with neat closure. Sometimes it ends with understanding. Sometimes it ends with change. And sometimes that's enough. If this story moved you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring real, powerful stories that inspire awareness, compassion, and change. Tell us in the comments, have you ever seen someone misunderstood because of a medical condition or a moment of crisis? Your voice matters. Your story matters. Thanks for watching, and remember, listening can save a life.